welcome back to the In Living Virtue YouTube channel. As you can see, we have a guest here with us today. Her name is Mikaela Scott, and she's going to be taking a part in the conversation about wilderness experiences. Hey, Mikaela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey girly, thank you for having me.
First things first, could you just give us a brief background of your faith journey? How did you come to Christ? Were you raised in the church? And then what was the life situation that actually prompted you to take it serious for yourself?
I was 1000% raised in the church. I grew up going to my grandparents' church, and that church had people, everyone in the congregation was related to us. So we had that kind of church experience. And then, um, man, from as early as I can remember, going to my parents' church where, they served in ministries and were on teams and, walking through the hallways and people know you because I went to that church from like, I'm going to make it up, kindergarten until present day, right? And so, like, growing up and like really being a part of a church family. I grew up going to church on Sunday for multiple services, and then Tuesday was Bible study, and Wednesday was probably like choir rehearsal or something, and Friday was youth night, and,
Oh,
and so
wow.
we were in church, right? Um, and I can say that church was important to me, so it wasn't like I was being forced or dragged to go to church or anything like that. And um, I would say that once I got to college is when I learned that, you know, you can have roots in the church and not necessarily have adopted those same values and beliefs and convictions for yourself yet. Um, and so I would say it was towards the end of college for me when um, I started going to church on my own, making it a priority. No matter what I had done on Saturday, how late I was up on Saturday, my friends and I, we were going to church on Sunday. And so, um, yeah, I would say that was the first time, college for sure. And then senior year, I'll tell a really quick story. This is like maybe a month out from graduating in May. My friends and I, we had gone to church on a Sunday and we were at one of my other friends' house to do homework and get ready for the week. And, you can play the YouTube on the background. And we had, some worship music on, nothing intentional. We weren't paying it any mind. And so we're working and the songs are playing in the background. And then literally, I don't even know how to describe it to you, but suddenly it was like the middle of the night and we had been worshiping for the entire night. We were telling stories about our faith. We were talking about the Lord. And it was like this shift that happened where the next few weeks we were like meeting up every night to worship and pray. And the Lord was speaking to us. And it's like, I can't even fully tell the story because I don't remember why it happened. I don't remember how we were talking about it. And I feel like that moment shifted things for me. Um, because after that, I started to have my own convictions. And so we didn't participate in the senior week events. Like, that's unheard of. Everybody was going to the parties and getting ready for graduation, and we weren't. And it didn't feel like missing out on something. And it's not something my parents made me do, right? Um, and so that's when it kind of all started to become real for me, where, I had my own convictions. And I think that is the origin for having your own faith.
And it's always those moments when you can't explain it. Like, I just can't explain it. I have no explanation. I don't even know if it's
Mhm.
real. I just know something shifted.
Exactly.
So we're having a conversation about wilderness experiences. Can you share a little bit about your understanding of a wilderness experience? Specifically, did you have any idea of how it applied to our faith journeys, like modern day, prior to this conversation? Had you ever heard of a wilderness experience prior to us, like talking about it? Like, what do you think of it?
So I had heard of wilderness before, and it was 1000% in the context of like the children of Israel going through the wilderness, right? Um, and in that context, the wilderness always seemed like a really punitive, like, this is what you get for X, Y, and Z. You get to go through the wilderness. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Because they were in the wilderness forever, literally forever. And then I cannot tell you when, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but there was a sermon, I don't know if you heard it, that Sarah Jakes Roberts did. This is years ago. Um, and I don't know if it was called Wilderness. I don't know if it was called Wild Woman, but I just remember that she just kept saying, like, I'm a wild woman. And the premise of the message was her talking about how a wilderness is a place where like things are not meant to be able to grow, people are not meant to thrive there. um it's dry, right? But she was talking about how and I could be making this up because this was so long ago, but I just remember her saying like God would give you the ability to thrive in those spaces and in those seasons when you shouldn't be able to. And so that kind of shifts the perspective of a wilderness being punitive versus like, okay, um, how is God going to equip me to thrive in a place that I shouldn't be able to thrive in? And, like when Jesus goes into the wilderness, why am I being sent here? Right.
That also went into another question that I had. So you mentioned the Israelites wandering through the wilderness. And I think that that is one of the stories in the Bible that a lot of us immediately think about when we hear that word. I was going to ask you if there was another story in the Bible that you think about when you hear the word wilderness, and you mentioned Jesus being in the wilderness. Would you say
Mm-hmm.
that that's the other story that you immediately think about when you hear that word?
Yes, 100%. Um, yeah, Jesus going to the wilderness, but not just like wandering into the wilderness on his own, but the fact that, the Holy Spirit personally took him by the hand and led him there to be tempted. It's so clear.
Mhm.
Um, there's no room for like he stumbled upon this season, he accidentally took a wrong turn and ended up in this season, right? Um, and so again, it points to God's intentionality and uh, the uncomfortable reality that wilderness is intentional, right? And productive. But I also thought of um, Moses and how he had a season where, he was in Egypt, he was raised in Egypt, all the things, and then he leaves Egypt after killing that person. And he ends up in the desert, which is where, he gets married, he has his in laws and all the things. But he's out there for, I have no idea how long. He's in the desert away from Egypt. Um, but that's where he has the burning bush experience. That's where the Lord gives him the assignment of going back to Egypt and delivering his people. And so again, it's like these intentional moments of being, I guess, kind of away from the end goal, right? Where it kind of feels like a timeout, or it feels like, sit over here for a little bit. That God seems to do like his refining and his like you get clear instructions and um let me get all of these things off of you before I send you to do what I actually want you to do, kind of thing.
So, have you been through a wilderness experience in your faith journey?
Have I?
GotQuestions.org describes the wilderness experience as a time of intensified temptation and spiritual attack. It can
Mm,
involve a spiritual, financial, or an emotional drought. They said that having a wilderness experience is not necessarily a sign that a believer is sinning, but rather it's a time of God ordained testing. Like you were just talking about how it's very intentional.
Mhm.
So could you share a wilderness experience that you have gone through, whether it's spiritual, whether it's financial, um, or an emotional drought? Like, in what was a moment that God tested you in your faith journey by using a wilderness-like experience?
I think I've had two or three
Mhm.
um, to date. The third one being current and ongoing and right now. Um, yeah, I can say that this current wilderness season has been the most interesting, I think, because it has affected like all of those areas at once. And so I think in previous seasons, it might have been like, okay, it's financial. We're wrestling through finances right now. We're trusting God with finances right now. Okay, cool. And I can kind of like pigeonhole that. Um, or it's like, okay, I'm working on my faith over here. I'm trusting God for this. I'm learning what I believe in. And so it's kind of isolated over here. But this season, it feels more like we are uprooting everything. We are starting from the ground up, and it has rocked every single area. There's also like a grace one, I think, wilderness seasons, um, because it's like I'm going through it. It's not something I would have chosen for myself. And simultaneously, I can talk about it um, with clarity. And like, I can say, yep, this is what's happening here. This is what he's bringing me through. He's trying to teach me this. I haven't learned it yet, but he's trying. Like,
Mhm.
like I can see what he's doing. I can articulate what he's doing. Um, and so it's not as heavy, I think, as if, the perspective that you kind of just stumble into a wilderness season or he's punishing you for something because it comes as a consequence or um, if that makes sense. And so part of my wilderness season has been um, just like taking me to the foundation of a lot of stuff. So, for example, with my family, I am rebuilding relationships with my family in ways that I couldn't have said, you know what? Okay, this year I really want to work on my family and I'm going to do this, this, and this so that the relationship can look like this. Um, it's just kind of happening as a result of being in the wilderness, right? And so he's forcing me to learn what it means to not be so independent. Um, because he's gotten me to a point where I can't even be independent if I tried. And so through like that forced humility, um, I'm learning, okay, I can depend on people like this. I can ask for this. It's okay to need this. All right. And so it's almost like he's training me literally from the ground up these things that, you might learn in childhood or you might learn as a teenager. And if you don't, you end up being a grown up learning them all over again, right? Um, the same thing with like going to church and things like that. I went through a season where it was like, do I belong at this church? Do I agree with what this pastor is saying? Um, is it okay to change churches? Like, just really getting to, like I said, foundational things of what are heaven and hell issues? What is worth joining a church for? What are my priorities? The things like what really matters, um, friendships, my marriage, just like everything is like, okay, let's start over. What do we think about this? Okay, what do we think about this one? And it's like removing all the distractions, removing all of the patterns, and you kind of just get used to going with the flow kind of thing. And I have just been fully disrupted. Like
Yeah.
completely upset, upside down. let's start over.
Would you say that the first time you went through a wilderness experience, it was a little more challenging as opposed to your current experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, mm, I take it back.
Ooh.
I think it was challenging in different ways. So, my first wilderness experience, I had just come off the heels of that like encounter with the Holy Spirit in college, right? Where I'm worshiping with my friends all day. We're not going to class, we're just praying and all the things. Great, right? Um, and then I moved to Dallas where I had no friends and really no family for the most part. And so I was going to work. It was my first year teaching, and I was coming home to no friends, no family. And I had just decided I was not going to be dating anymore. I wanted to pursue the Lord for this year. So I have no family, no friends, no vice that I'm used to, right? Um, and so that was challenging, right? Because there's like increased loneliness, isolation, all the things, figuring out how to be an adult outside of college, not near my friends anymore, right? So like that's challenging. Um, and then fast forward to now, I have friends, I have my family. I'm a little bit more confident in my faith and with the Lord. Um, and yet, when all of the rugs got pulled out, it didn't matter that I was 7 years into my faith, right? Like you still feel the fact that the things that feel confident, not confident, the things that feel comfortable, the things that feel secure and reliable. Um, I don't think it matters what season of life it is when they get pulled out. When they get pulled out, you feel it, right? Um, so yeah, I think I might have a little bit more wisdom about what is happening, but I don't think that it changes what it feels like when it happens. And I think that's the answer that I would rather say.
And that's good. I think that different people can testify to different things. So for some people, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
girl, this is a piece of cake. And it's like, kudos to you. But then for some of us, it's like, yeah, this still sucks. It
Mm-hmm.
really, really sucks. I have like a popcorn question here. I want you to fill in the blank. So, God blank. So, I can speak for myself. My word would be God restores because my particular experience with wilderness experiences, I can testify to the fact that God restored a lot of things in my life. So,
Yeah.
if you had to pick one word, what would your word be to fill in that blank?
Hmm. I would say there's so many, obviously, right? But I would say God illuminates.
Oh,
And I would say God illuminates because I think that kind of what led me into my wilderness season was the Lord turning the lights on in areas that had previously been allowed to exist in the dark, right? And so, um, my own patterns that I was doing subconsciously, He turned the lights on, so now I can see those and like I can make a conscious choice. Do I want to address these, or do I want to have to go through this wilderness again and address them, right? Um, I think the Lord turned the lights on in terms of, things that weren't working in my marriage, things that weren't working in terms of my relationships at church and in my career with teaching. I just think that the Lord allowed me to see, okay, this is what I see. This is kind of what's going on already. I am inviting you into this season where it's probably going to hurt when you're, confronted with all of these things for what they are. Um, I'm with you. And, like I'm giving you the free will to make some choices about what happens after these this season, this period, this time, whatever. So I would say definitely the Lord illuminates. He doesn't allow things to stay in the dark for very long. And he's very intentional and strategic about when he alerts us, and allows us to see certain things.
Amen.
Because you know it's crazy when you're in a wilderness season, sometimes you don't want to be encouraged or like think positively because it sometimes it feels heavy, it's weighty, this sucks, all the things. Um, but what I was thinking about this morning was this phrase that is the phrase of my life, and it is the Lord is kind. Um, and even in the wilderness, he is kind. And so if we were talking about the children of Israel, and I had never seen this verse before, but when the Lord took the children of Israel out of Egypt, they've been in slavery. He does this huge show, all the plagues and all the things. He takes them out of Egypt, and there was a like direct path from where they were to the promised land. Could have gone straight there, story's done, whatever. But if they had gone straight from where they were to the promised land, there were going to be, they would have encountered the giants or whoever was living in those lands, and they would have had to fight. And the Lord, in his kindness, knew, okay, they're coming out of Egypt, they're coming out of slavery, they only know slavery. They're probably not in the best position to immediately go into battle. They're probably not in the best position to have strategy and know how to follow a leader and like all of these things so that they'll actually be successful. And so the Lord took them the long way on purpose, in a journey that was supposed to be 40 days. It was supposed to be the long way, but it wasn't supposed to be 40 years long. Um, and anyway, it was his kindness because he knew what they could handle. He knew their capacity at that point in time. Um, and so I would just say to myself and to, whoever needs it, that there is kindness in the wilderness and there is protection in the wilderness, provision in the wilderness, and preparation so that whatever is coming next won't be as heavy, won't be as culture shocking, won't be as whatever, right? And we just have to trust the Lord's wisdom, his timing, and his character that whatever is in me right now, that he says, you know what, we need to pause and have a wilderness. That means that thing is going to potentially get in the way of whatever he has for me in the promised land. And so we have to take a time out and we have to do some stripping and some pruning and some refining and maybe some moving around and maybe whatever. I just have to trust that his character is good. And then it doesn't have to be forever. I can make it longer, but it doesn't have to be forever. And so that's my little 2 cents.
Yeah, girl. That was so good. Thank you so much for sharing just your experience, but also your wisdom from your experience and the encouragement that you offered. I really appreciate you taking part in the conversation and just opening up a little bit.
Thank you for having me, girl.
Absolutely.